Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Yvonne Roberts and I work for AOC Archaeology, as I've just been introduced. And I work as a project manager. And over the last couple of years, I've had the absolute joy of working on this really exciting site in Portgordon, Moray. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about the site where we recorded over 885 archaeological features within the windblown sands, with evidence for human activity starting in the early Neolithic period and repeated periods of occupation up until the Iron Age. At the moment, we haven't really found much evidence for any occupation later than this, but that might come through in post-excavation once we untangle these features from prehistoric remains. One of the most exciting revelations was the presence of a large rectangular structure considered to be a Neolithic timber hall, paralleling structures at sites such as Balbrigdy in Aberdeenshire, Doon Hill in East Lothian, and Clash in Stirling. But there's also great interest in the reuse of the site in the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, which I'll briefly touch on as well. The project is now in the early stages of post-excavation analysis, which aims to give us a much greater understanding of the chronology of the features, as well as the length of occupation, transitions between the periods, and any reuse of the landscape. As we're in the early stages of this, we still have a lot more to find out, but today I'll hopefully be able to give you a bit of a summary of where we are with things and what we hope to find out. And I'll briefly touch on as well how I hope this site contributes to kind of the wider discussions of prehistoric settlement and ceremony in a landscape context. So the site itself, the site's located to the south of the village of Portgordon, which you can see kind of around here. Just off the coast, the northeast coast. This is an area with a very long history of arable farming with very fertile, silty soils that Moray is really famous for. The works were development-led and were undertaken on behalf of William Grant ahead of whisky warehouses being built. Initial investigation started in June 2022, and this led straight into targeted excavation once we found quite a dense concentration of features. The excavation works were completed in March 2023, and we uncovered a wide range of structures, pits and post holes, some ditches and different spreads of material. And we also uncovered a large paleo channel that came through the site, kind of roughly aligned northwest to southeast. Just a bit of background about the general area. There are quite a few prehistoric sites that have been identified in the wider area through aerial photography, which you can see here on the screen, a range of Iron Age general prehistoric sites and Bronze Age sites. So there is some known activity, but a lot of this hasn't really survived well in such a heavily ploughed area. So a lot of the recent excavations that we've been doing, we've not been finding very much. So this kind of came as a bit of a surprise. Particularly also as the aerial photography for the site itself didn't really show any evidence for the scale of features that were below ground. This is likely as a result of features being obscured and flattened out by ploughing. And in fact, a lot of the features that we found were really quite shallow, having been truncated as a result of that ploughing. So on the screen here in red, that's just the development boundary for the whisky warehouses where we did all the trenching. That then narrowed down to these 3 excavation areas where we found, a huge amount of archaeology. The paleo channel you can kind of see coming through here from the southeast and just comes through the site, kind of comes up into this excavation area along this route here. The green area, the yellow area, sorry, these are just test pits that we were doing during the excavations. They were blank. And over in the blue, that's just a watching brief area where we found 4 kind of isolated post holes with no kind of diagnostic artifacts at all. So we're hoping to get some dates for those in like radiocarbon dates during the post-excavation phase, just to see how they relate to any of the other activity. So this slide just shows the 3 excavation areas that were over in the east, and we identified concentrations of features in the trial trenching, which just kind of narrowed it down to this eastern side. If we look at the topography a little bit, it's somewhat kind of a flat area near the coast, but there are very subtle ridges, which you might be able to kind of pick out on the screen. So this is area 1 and 3 which joined up together. There's this ridge that kind of comes through here, and you can see here this is kind of the main concentration of archaeology. This grayer, paler grey deposit, the sand, this is the paleo channel here, and over in area 2, relatively flat again, but this is where the paleo channel would be coming through, and a slight rise up to where all the features were concentrated. And if we focus in on areas 1 and 3, this slide just shows you the kind of scale of archaeology that we encountered across the whole area. It might not look like it, but this is a massive area. And yeah, we kind of we spent a long time stripping all the topsoil off. The area kind of contained several structures over a range of periods, with the rectangular post-built structure or timber hall here in the centre, along with several roundhouses, 4-post structures, small circular structures and enclosures, some grain storage pits, hearths and fire pits, evidence for metalworking, as well as 2 cremation pits. And these features represent multiple periods of activity in the Neolithic, Bronze Age and Iron Age. And that's kind of evidenced by the types of features we were finding, how they related to each other, as well as the artifactual remains. And again, you can see the paleo channel, my favorite feature apparently, if I keep talking about, coming through just here. For area 2, this was a little bit more scattered, and there weren't as many kind of clearly defined structures. The artifactual evidence suggests predominantly early Neolithic occupation, and we think that this might be a kind of temporary camp or seasonal activity that was away from the more substantial evidence to the north, if they are indeed contemporary at all. And that might be why we can't see as many clearly defined structures in this area. So the Neolithic evidence was recorded all across the site, and you can see the various structures kind of highlighted here in the 2 different areas. We've kind of got suggestions of predominantly early to early middle Neolithic occupation, with diagnostic fragments of carinated bowl and unsim bowl. And these were recovered from a number of features across the site. That's at the moment just based on kind of initial quick assessment of the diagnostic pottery, as a full analysis is still needing to be carried out once we've recovered all the material from the samples. And at that point, we're hoping to get a much tighter and more secure chronology across the whole site to understand how these features related to each other. And so this rectangular post-built structure, what we're all here for, the timber hall, it comprised a rectangular timber-built structure, as you can see here, coming through. And this has been interpreted as an early Neolithic timber hall. That's based on spot dates from diagnostic carinated ware that was found within the post holes. But we hope that we'll get more kind of secure dating from that through radiocarbon dates and all the pottery being analysed. If you look at the plan in the top right up here, you can see that the structure was aligned east-northeast to west-southwest. It measured 16 meters in length and 9 meters in width, with the outer extents defined by these large, evenly spaced post holes, shown in yellow, and it narrowed to a kind of trapezoid end in the west. The features located to the east of the structure may also have formed a yard or an annex, giving it an extended length of possibly 25 meters. So a lot of the examples that we see of these in the early Neolithic range between kind of 17 to 25 meters, so it fits quite well within that range. If we look at the interior, we had, it was subdivided by these rows of post holes, giving and some further internal features. So there was this 4-post structure shown in blue and several large intercutting pits, which are just kind of shown down in this corner here. There is also a kind of line shown in green of these internal posts that might have been able to support a roof. So just some background on the kind of post holes here. You can see they're quite shallow, and they ranged in depth depending on the level of preservation, but they were generally subcircular, and from what we could tell in the field, they seemed to be sub-rounded or circular posts that had been used with tapered bases. But we aren't quite ruling out just at this stage whether there were maybe square posts or half rounds being used in some areas, or maybe if they've been squared off at the base, particularly as they were so shallow, so quite hard to tell. The posts themselves, there was definitely an evidence for repair with recuts noted, and the posts seem to have been burnt at the base, at least, possibly for the construction to preserve them, but also could have been part of a burning at the end of the use of this structure. So we hope to get a lot more information on all of this from the various QBN tins and samples that we took that focus on the post pipes that were surviving, as well as post holes. So it wasn't just a timber hall that we encountered. There were a lot of other Neolithic structures and pit groups that we found evidence for. And the pattern of features range from groups of pits to circular and square post hole arrays, and these could represent smaller structures or enclosures, storage spaces, working areas, or indeed relate to something a bit more ceremonial, or a bit of both. For example, the four-post structures may parallel examples that have been recorded as Neolithic mortuary platforms, as suggested by Barclay, Russell White, and Brophy, amongst many others. Examples of those could be seen at Balfarg and Carsey Mains. For the Neolithic artifactual remains, across the site, we kind of recovered quite a lot of material, some of it diagnostic, some still needing to be looked at in a lot closer detail. There was pottery, lithics, and worked stones, and this included a really large collection of early Neolithic pottery, early to maybe early middle. We collected a mixture of what appears to be early Neolithic pottery with examples of kind of very finely made carinated bowl, as well as larger fragments and parts of vessels that appear to fit more closely with what Alison Sheridan has termed kind of modified carinated bowl, which is a little bit later. And there's also some examples of Unston ware seen in Orkney and across the northeast as well. So work on this will really help us to kind of untangle just when certain structures were being occupied and how the site developed over time. You can also see on the screen a few lithics over here and some of this the worked stone here. So this is a particularly interesting piece that was taken out of some packing material for one of the post holes in the timber hall. And there seems to be a kind of fractured and burnt quernstone. So it might just be packing material for one of the repairs to a post hole, but it might be something a little bit more symbolic. The Bronze Age and Iron Age evidence, this really seems to be restricted to the northern part of the site. Up to 7 roundhouse structures were identified, typically with an 8 to 8.7 meter internal diameter, for those of you who like those kinds of facts. There was some small scale metalworking and dispersed pits. And there was kind of evidence for symbolic and mortuary practices as well, as evidenced by 2 cremation pits that were recorded side by side, just in this structure here. There were a number of fractured quernstones and pottery identified from the ring ditches, post holes, and pits of the roundhouses as well. So definitely a range of activity going on. And we'll look a lot more at the chronology of these features in more detail when we're doing the post-excavation work. But for now, the main kind of takeaways are really that the Bronze Age and Iron Age activity are demonstrating further settlement in this immediate location, with people repeatedly returning to this landscape. And that's likely driven by the very fertile land and surrounding resources, in addition to their links to the past. And this takes us on to the Paleo Channel, one of possibly the main reasons why people were settling here. This natural feature was likely one of the main draws in the prehistoric period. And at the moment, although it's kind of unclear when this was an active watercourse and for how long, the watercourse is thought to have been active throughout the prehistoric period, with the adjacent early to middle Neolithic features thought to be contemporary with the early infilling. So we recovered several fragments of carinated ware from the Paleo Channel, and there were also very charcoal-rich deposits towards the base. just with material possibly washing in, and then silting deposits above this. We've taken a number of monolith samples. You can see some of our team taking them there. And we're hoping we can get more information on the paleo-environmental remains that we can recover from this, just so we can understand how exactly this was formed and possibly understand a bit more about the environment that was during these phases of occupation. So Portgordon in the wider context, we'll start with the timber hall. And timber halls, these early Neolithic timber halls, are a type of early structure associated with early farming generations in Scotland. The structures remain somewhat enigmatic, with multiple different ideas of exactly what they represent. And they could have been these kind of communal houses for communities that when they first moved into an area, and then forming smaller individual farming groups from there, as Alison Sheridan has suggested. And Kenny Brophy has done a lot of work looking at just the different structures, and that he's kind of suggested that there may be these two different phases to early Neolithic timber halls, with earlier roofed big houses that are later being kind of replaced by ceremonial and mortuary cult houses, drawing on the idea of social memory and tradition. There's only 7 other examples of the earlier roofed big houses that have been excavated in mainland Scotland. This would be Doonhill A, which is in East Lothian, Balbridie in Aberdeenshire, Clash in Stirling, Warrenfield Crathis in Aberdeenshire, and Lockerbie in Dumfries and Galloway. And we currently have no other examples in Moray, or indeed this far north on the mainland, that have actually been excavated. There's also 2 other examples, that have come out through guard excavations in Carnoustie in Angus, that they believe also to be timber halls, one of which may be the largest to have ever been encountered at 35 meters, which is mad. But the excavations of all of these have shown that there's quite a degree of variation, which you can see in these ones here. These are 3 examples from England. So if we focus on the A to D, these are 2 different projections of Doonhill, I believe. So based on the placement of the post holes within the structure at Portgordon, it certainly appears that it would at least have been roofable. And so it may fit with these kind of earlier timber halls. And the layout kind of really shows similarities to Clash and Doonhill A, where the structures are defined by post holes rather than flanking ditches, which you can see on those styles there. The presence of querns and pottery within the post holes associated with the structure also suggests a very strong domestic focus here. And we found carinated bowl recovered from the timber hole post holes, which has helped us to give a bit of an indicative date for the structure, with the pottery of this type thought to appear in Scotland around 3800 BC and continue possibly to 3600. The style is pretty strongly represented in northeast Scotland, with the tradition stemming from small farming groups immigrating from the north of France to Britain and Ireland as well. And farmers appear to have sought out and found areas of very high agricultural potential and proceeded to clear forestry in order to establish their settlements and farmlands. And Moray would be a really good choice, to be honest, with very fertile agricultural land. But the site is also just so much more than the timber hall itself, or the big house, as these buildings really can't have existed in isolation. With this project being developer-led, we were able to open a much bigger area around the timber hall than might have otherwise been possible. And this is particularly exciting as we found the structure as Ian Ralston has been reevaluating the works at Doonhill and Balbridie. So we can hope to add to this discussion of early Neolithic structures while applying different methods that maybe weren't available at the time of these early excavations of other sites. And what's going to be really important during the post-excavation programme is not just understanding the timber hall, how it was constructed and used, but also what was going on in the surrounding landscape and what any contemporary smaller structures or land use features might have been used for. And it'll be really interesting to see just how the site has been occupied over time, considering the Bronze Age and Iron Age occupation that we've encountered. So we really hope to delve into the continuity of land use, or indeed any breaks between land use. And the next steps really of that, so our post-excavation programme has just started, so we really need to complete all the sample processing and recover all artefacts and ecofacts, of which there are quite a lot so far. This will then be followed by analysis of all of that material. Some of the main priorities will be the pottery assemblage, as well as the environmental assessments, so that we can learn more about what people were doing and how they were using the different areas across the site. We may be able to learn more about diet from further lipid analysis, as well as the environmental assessment, so that we can know if and when they were cultivating bread wheat and other varieties of wheat, barley and linseed, know whether domesticated cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were kept, and analysis of absorbed lipids into the pottery. In the past, this has shown that dairying was part of this introduced subsistence process. So it'll be really interesting to see how that compares at Portgordon, particularly since we're quite near the coast, and a marine diet seems to have been left behind as there's more of a reliance on farming. Oh, I've gone too far, sorry. We'll also be looking into the soil micromorphology in closer detail to unpick different episodes of activity. And this will be really interesting to look at in comparison to the paleo channel as well. And one of the main benefits of developer-led archaeology is often that we get a bit of extra funding and can kind of carry out a lot more radiocarbon dates than we might otherwise be able to. So we can look at different areas of the site that might otherwise have to be overlooked. And finally, of course, we'll have to share all of our findings. So expect to see us back at some point in the future. So this will be done through reporting and publication, where we'll compare the site to various other examples and just in the kind of wider context of Moray. And yeah, the local community and various researchers seem really excited about this site, just as we are. So it'll be great to keep working with them as things unfold. And I'll just end with thanking, on that note, all the people that have been involved in the project to date, several of which have come out today to support us, which is great. It was a particularly bitter winter, excavating between November and March in the northeast of Scotland. So thank you particularly to the fieldwork team. And yeah, the post-excavation team who are working through all the material at the moment, and probably for quite some time until we get it all written up. So yeah, thank you everyone. And particularly also to our funders, William Grant, who were an excellent support system throughout the whole process.